Hello, listener. Welcome back to the Rural American Surgeon. I'm your host, Dr. Randy Lehman. And yes, I recognize the irony of producing an episode on the concept of efficiency when I have just missed 2 weeks in a row, not just one, but 2 weeks of producing an episode for you. That being said, let's stop and celebrate 1 year of the Rural American Surgeon. The first episode came out 9/11/24, and this episode, if I can get it out on time, should come out on 9/18/24. We have, I think I've missed maybe 4 total weeks in a year. And a weekly podcast, I will tell you, is not for the faint of heart, and it does require a fair amount of focus and efficiency to get her did, if you will. So I would like to first thank my podcast producers, which would be On Air Brands and Eric Cabral and his assistant, Kaylee Green. There's no way. I could have done this without you. You guys don't see what goes on behind the scenes for the Rural American Surgeon. But basically, I use a software to record, and then the editing and the producing and the Facebook and the shorts and the reels and posting to YouTube, maintaining the website, which includes full length transcriptions of all the episodes and is searchable in that regard, is all, I would not have the time to do that. So step one with efficiency is really talking about something like that. So thank you so much to On Air Brands for what you do. If anybody's considering a podcast, I couldn't recommend them more. Wonderful people to work with, very good at what they do and very reasonable. So that being said, let's use that as an illustration for the first concept of efficiency. So I would say efficiency is something that I'm very good at. I'm so good at efficiency that I just now I waste a lot of time because I've gotten my hours of my day so efficient. But I also kind of wonder, I think I've always wasted a fair amount of time. And I wonder if there's mental clarity that comes from wasting time. There's a lot of ways to waste time. Let's not talk about how I waste time. Let's talk about how I'm efficient. And then you can maybe apply some of those things to your life. One of the other highly efficient people of our time, I would say, would be Elon Musk. And it's a little different than what he does versus what a general surgeon does in rural America, because the rural surgeon still has to actually crank out the work. I do think, but I just want to use one quote, basically. And the one quote is, I think it's the most common or maybe the biggest mistake of a smart engineer is optimizing something which should not exist. That is the best way to be efficient. Don't do something. I think a lot of people are very busy and they're running around trying to very quickly, maybe and efficiently, do things that they should not be doing at all. The best way to be efficient is just don't do it. You can think about that concept and you can apply it to your life in a lot of different ways. I would leave that up to you, how you want to apply it. But I have some examples of how to apply things, how I apply things in my life, both personally, professionally, and in surgery. And so first off, if the thing's important, then you must do it. But what it requires you to do in order to be really efficient is to identify what are the important things. And so start with surgery. So in surgery, there are certain important steps that must not be left out and must be done, and they must be done well. And another way to be efficient as a surgeon is to do those things well so that you don't have complications and then you don't have to come back, because the least efficient way to manage your practice is to be cleaning up messes and putting out fires all the time. There's no such thing as complication-free surgery if the only way to not have any complications is to not do any surgery. And that's reality. But at the same time, we know that basically if you can focus, if when you're a resident, if you can do more cases, if you can be generally a busier surgeon, if you can focus on the right things, then you can minimize your complication rate as much as possible. And of course, you should want to try to do that. And that will be an efficient way to do it. Let me give you one example. Let's talk about laparoscopic cholecystectomy. When you're making incisions for laparoscopic sites, the whole idea of making one incision, placing one port site, making the second incision, placing the second port site, making the third incision, placing the third port. That's a good example of it doesn't have to be that way. You can look and know where your ports are going to go. 1, 2, 3, make the incisions with the scalpel. 1, 2, 3, put the ports in, and you're off to the races. Another example with laparoscopic cholecystectomy is my favorite instrument is the suction irrigator that contains the hook cautery inside of it. Pulling an instrument out and putting a new instrument in takes so much time and is one of the least efficient things that you can do. So when I use that instrument, and it takes a little bit to get used to it, but pulling the sleeve back and the hook cautery then is exposed, and you can push the sleeve back out, and then you're back to a suction cautery. You want to make sure with this instrument you're not pushing it in to the port and then the hook cautery becomes exposed inadvertently. But if you can use that instrument, that I basically do my entire lap chole with that instrument. It's in and out with the hook cautery and the suction. And I would say I do more dissection with the suction irrigator than I do with the cautery. It's really like we had a concept, little paddle, little buzz. That would be like an open Bovie technique. I basically do it that way, but the little paddle is with the suction. And the nice thing also about the suction is you can hit the suction while you're cauterizing, suck smoke at the same time. So, not being able to see, that's another really inefficient thing. So if it's worth it, like if you're having issues seeing, first off, making sure that your laparoscopic equipment doesn't need polishing. Another quote about efficiency is Abraham Lincoln apparently said, I think as if I had 10 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first 8 sharpening my axe or something to that nature, but just sharpening the saw, working on the system. Now, that said, you cannot spend the first 10 hours sharpening the saw or sharpening the axe. You got to chop at some point. But the concept is continue to work on the system and the flow and the way that you do things more than just chopping with a dull axe. You will get more done when your axe is sharp. And so when you're a resident, you're focused on little tips and tricks and write them down and then tell me what they are. If you can, because I'm always looking for things like that myself. And then, no wasted steps. Like don't keep going back and doing the same thing over. If you find yourself repeating something, you don't need to do that. With clipping back to the gallbladder, clipping the cystic duct and cystic artery when it's time. So if you did your cholangiogram, everything looks good. For me, I've got my Maryland ready. I bring my Maryland in. I take my clip off that held my cholangiocatheter in place. And then I take it out. I usually take my Maryland. I set it on the skin right where the angiocath is, where my cholangiocatheter went through in the right upper quadrant. I squeeze it with my Maryland. I pick the whole thing up, pull the whole catheter out all at once with the angiocath, hand the Maryland back. I don't need that for the rest of the case. And then I usually have my clip applier sitting right there. I reach back over, I pick up my clip applier, and I'm coming in. My duct and my artery are already dissected. My critical view is already there. And so I bring it right in and I clip right below the area where the cholangiocatheter was in, clip to my artery, clip. There does not need to be coming out with the clip applier on the artery, flipping it over to push up into the gallbladder if there's enough space. Now, that said, if there's not, you have to do that move, but you can just do it in a row. Like coming out, flipping over, it's a wasted time. I think people do that move because they saw people do it and they think that's how it should be done. It doesn't, and then I'm out and I go with my scissor. Sometimes I go with my cautery to save a step, but it just depends if I have enough space or not. If it's tight, I bring my scissor in, bam, bam, and then back to my suction hook cautery, and I'm off to the races. Then the other thing is take that gallbladder down, put it in a bag, take it out. Don't struggle with your extraction. Make a bigger incision if you need to. Open the gallbladder in the bag, to suck it. If it's just fluid, if it's just a stone, you're going to have to make a bigger incision. Just don't hesitate. Try to get it out. But if the gallbladder doesn't come out because the incision for your Hassan trocar or whatever trocar you're using, just make it bigger right away. Quickly make that decision and then carry on. Figure out what works for you, efficient wise for closing fascia. But closing skin, does it need to be done by you? Is there somebody on the team that is willing and interested and you can invest in them and they feel better about themselves afterwards and they can end up closing skin as well as you can? I think you can teach them. I think everybody knows that it doesn't have to be you that closes the skin. And so working with your hospital to develop that, that's all just in one case. But if you can have each case kind of like mentally prepared in that regard, like step by step by step, and between steps, there doesn't need to be any time and there doesn't need to be anything else going on with the case besides those steps. Most of my opening inguinal hernias, they end up taking over 40 minutes, but I have done an appy in 18 minutes. I have done a lap chole in 18 minutes, and I have done an open inguinal hernia repair with mesh Liechtenstein technique. It was a small one. I didn't hardly say a single word during the case, but I did do that in 18 minutes. So 18 minutes is apparently my like asymptote or whatever, where on all these cases, I end up capping out. But a Liechtenstein opening inguinal hernia repair in 18 minutes, no complications, no problems. Now understand, on a thin, indirect male, fine. But I mean, it was male. I had to do the keyhole and everything. The staff knew step by step what the next things were. And you have to kind of like reinforce that. So that's efficiency in surgery. But this is a Money Miniseries as well as a surgery podcast. And I think I've hammered the point of why we want to be efficient, right? Because you want to reclaim your time for things that are important to you. And I've talked about personally what's important to me and what I think like my purpose is in life. So I'm not going to talk about that again right now. If you want to talk about that, go back to episode 1 of the Money Miniseries. Financially, I think about things in terms of $1 per hour on everything that I do. You have to be careful with this because it has gotten so ridiculous. Like my life has gotten so ridiculous in a good way. I'm saying that if I'm taking time away from work, like I know what that costs on a per day basis and or per hour basis. But it's actually quite good because when I take full day away from a weekday and we have, say, friends that come in town and they stay with us and we do a slow day with our families together and we talk about things and we sharpen the saw with each other, right? I know the dollar amount that costs me for that day. And it's a large number. And in a way, it's like I'm paying that amount of money to spend that time with my family and my friends. And the reason it's obvious, the obvious reason that it's bad is because you can then not spend time with your family and friends because you feel like it's too expensive. So I don't do that. But it does cross your mind if you go as far as I have with thinking about efficiency. So you just have to be aware of that. But the good thing is it makes you think about who you're spending your time with. And is it worth it? If this is the true cost, the opportunity cost, if you will, of spending this day with this person, is it worth it? Right? And not to be cruel, but there's millions of people that you could be choosing to spend your time with. There's actually billions of people that you could be spending your time with. And so it forces you to focus on who's actually sharpening your saw. I would say it makes your friendships deeper and more meaningful. And I tend to invest more in the close friends because now it's a give and take relationship. And I know that they are that important to me that I'm going to spend these hours or this day with the person, especially when it's business day, business hours, I would say. Nights and evenings and weekends, it is what it is. But if I'm going to take a day off and spend time with somebody, a couple of weeks ago, I went with just my wife and kids to the zoo during the business hours, not during the nights and weekends. And it feels like a worthwhile investment. Very happy I spent that day. It was a wonderful day. But when you're thinking about it in terms of efficiency, it makes you feel like you're choosing that over this other money thing. And it makes your value, for me, it makes my values feel very aligned and intentional, which is a goal. I mean, I want my life to be intentional. Next is to think about your dollar per hour. So I have a net worth spreadsheet that I track on Excel monthly. And I've done this since 2017. So I'm about 8 years into it. It's really amazing to see the up and to the right and the hockey stick nature of it. And I understand that there's been a lot of printed money and maybe I can't buy as much cheeseburgers with that dollar as I could have 8 years ago. But nonetheless, it keeps you very accountable, and what gets measured gets managed. Another point about efficiency is like the main thing is don't do it. Don't do the thing that you don't just be efficient with your time. So in surgery, right, are there things like surgeries that you don't want to do, like that are not worth it, right? And you could then take your practice to the point, like maybe not when you start out, but you can say, look, like I now am looking at my, however, if I'm paid, RVUs, or if I'm fee for service or whatever, I know that at my max producing peak, I'm generating this amount of dollar per hour. And so now I can compare everything to that. And so for me, another one is clinic. So being in the operating room generates, for me personally, and it depends how fast you are at clinic and how fast you are at the operating room. But for me personally, not being very good at clinic and hyper focused on efficiency in the operating room, the OR is worth about 2.5 times per hour personally for me as the operating room is. Now, that being said, the clinic is worth nothing for the hospital system that I am contracted with, because they're essentially paying me everything that I'm generating from clinic, and sometimes more. But in the operating room, it's the opposite. So I'm running their machine, which may generate $10,000 to $15,000 an hour, I would say, of at least of charges. Net revenues got to be 5 to 10, I would think, but it just kind of depends on what you're doing. You're operating a machine that only you can turn the keys on and start it and run it. The machine includes a lot of expensive parts, which would be the nurses and the techs and anesthesia and the equipment in the room and keeping the lights on and all that stuff, and even billing and coding and EMR, everything. But only you can turn the key. The administrator can't come and put that case in the operating room. And so when you're choosing to do that case in a rural hospital rather than in an urban hospital, you are now creating jobs in your community because you turned that key and you're running this engine and you're choosing to do it in your rural county rather than sending the patient elsewhere. So that is one of the big kind of purposes of why I love rural surgery. And now knowing a little bit more about me and knowing how efficiency is kind of a focus of mine, you might see why I feel that way. Of course, I care about the one patient that doesn't have to travel, and it's more efficient for them and convenient for them. And sometimes they won't get the care. And sometimes the cost of gas to get to the city is too much. And sometimes they're 85 years old and the burden of travel is just too much on them and their family. And so you want to be there for the poor and for the old, the medically indigent, and be able to do the care locally. But the reality is that you're also just increasing the quality of life for everybody in the whole county when you're choosing to do the operation there. That's different than a urban surgeon that comes out and does outreach clinic only, and they take the cases back to a urban center or an urban county. That does not do the same thing for the county as what I'm describing. So to be able to do the surgery close to home for people, that is my whole goal. And I understand not all surgery can or should by any means be done there. You have to know your resources. If you don't have an ICU, you don't have inpatient cardiology, you don't have dialysis, inpatient neph, you don't have IR. There's things you don't have, but you can learn what your limitations are, and you can go up to the edge of what you can do and choose to do it all there. And then what can't and shouldn't, that's your judgment. And, then you take that a different direction wherever it needs to go. Let me bounce back to what I was trying to say is being in the OR for my hospital system is infinitely better than me being in the clinic because they're not making anything on me being in the clinic. It's not actually sustaining anything when I'm in the clinic, but to grow and to kind of provide for the hospital so that it continues to exist and everything that I'm talking about can actually happen, I have to find myself in the operating room. And the more that I do that, the better it is. But for me personally, I do get paid for doing clinic, but I make probably 2 to 2.5 times more being in the operating room. Plus, I love being in the operating room, and I generally hate being in clinic. I mean, I love people. I'm an extrovert. I'm wiped out at the end of a clinic day. And at the end of a surgery day, I'm like, isn't there one more case to do? You know? So you have to know yourself, know what gives you energy. And so I have essentially replaced almost all of my clinic with Taylor, my nurse practitioner. And she's been working with me for 4 years, and that has required a lot more effort up front to sharpen the saw, so to speak, and train Taylor to think the way that I do. But now she does. She thinks the way that I do. Her notes read like my notes. I think she's like to the level of a third, maybe fourth year resident in terms of her thought process. She knows what she doesn't know, and she knows how. And so maybe she sees 16 patients on a clinic day, and maybe 2 of those I need to be involved in the decision making. We talk every day. She texts me or she calls me. A lot of times we travel together, and then she's with me in the same building. And so I'm over doing surgery in the surgery department. And then if I have to, between cases, I'll come if there's a patient that for some reason I need to see or an add-on. So we've just focused on what's the highest value and how can we do this? And the hospital systems are seeing it, and it's saving them money on the cost of clinic because we're having a nurse practitioner do the clinic rather than a general surgeon. And the cost to produce a general surgeon is much higher. Obviously, it takes 13 years of training, whereas nurse practitioner is your nursing school and then the NP program. And then it's mostly sort of, what she's doing with me, I've trained her how to do. So there's a big difference, and there should be a difference in terms of the cost of those things. For me, it's also just rewarding because I can see, I track, my productivity metrics in many different ways. But the other thing that I tracked almost from day one, maybe from 3 months in, I have every single case that I've ever done, ever, at any facility is recorded. Most of it is on one master spreadsheet. A few of the locums things is somewhere else, but every case is there. And so then I dump it into the SSR for my case logs. And do I dump it into the SSR myself? Thank you for asking. No, I do not. I have my assistant dump it into SSR. So how did I become more efficient with that? I realized that charting is a total waste of time. And if I can hire somebody that maybe they take 2 or 3 times as long as I do to do the chart, to do the note, to wrestle with the computer system, to dump the things into SSR, even if I could do it more efficiently, if I can hire them to do it, if I know what my dollar per hour is, right? Then I know what where the tipping point is for them to be able to do it instead of me. And so that's where it starts with knowing what your dollar per hour is. So what's your highest and best dollar per hour? And now everything that you do needs to compare to that. And so if it's not your highest dollar per hour, then it needs to be hitting some other buckets for you besides just making money. Like it needs to be strengthening your family relationships, or it needs to be something that you just love and you just would never want to give to somebody else, right? Which is fine. And if that's the case and you can't do that thing more efficiently and you can't make that thing profitable, then you have 168 hours per week and you choose how many hours you want to spend doing that thing. But if you're like me and being paid for your work still matters, which I think for me, for a few more years, it still will, although I could argue that it doesn't, then focusing on your highest dollar per hour is a great way to make sure that you can keep your work confined and you don't turn your practice from being 40 to 50 to 60 to 70 hours to make more money by doing more work. You can actually be more efficient and you can actually make more money over time by adding more value to the hospital system you work for, the community that you work for. If you don't add value, then you shouldn't be making more money. I strongly believe that. So, but right now in 2025, being a rural surgeon adds more value than being an urban surgeon, because there's a demand there, and it's a supply and demand thing. And I think people are professionally intimidated by the concept of being out there on your own. It is intimidating. I feel it. I 100% feel it. If you have a complication and you have to send a patient, first off, managing it on your own is hard. Secondly, having the humility to be talking to your surgical colleagues at university and sharing with them, the situation and sharing the patient with them and transferring a patient is very hard. It's humbling. Knowing your resources and managing your resources is hard. But that's the value that you're adding. And it is worth it. It's very worth it for me. I love it. It's worth the challenge. And so I support you in your efforts to provide care close to home for people in rural surgery. In 2021, so I finished residency in 2020, and then I started investing in real estate really hard when I got out. And it was a great time to be investing in real estate. It's like, don't let a good pandemic go to waste, so to speak. And obviously that's 100% joke. But you got to recognize the economic times that you're in. And what was happening is money was being printed, and it's a good time to own assets. And it's good, even better time to own leveraged assets with low interest rates. So I bought millions of dollars of real estate. And I track my net worth, and usually on the net worth statement, what I use for the value of the real estate, it's not like I change it every month. I don't go in there and say, I'm estimating this is going to be worth, or lying to myself and saying that it's worth more than it is. What I do is I write the last appraised value of the property. So usually that happens at a sale, and then maybe every 5 years or so, if you're owning it. If there's some other reason that I've done something to it, then I might change the value, but usually it's the last appraised value. And I was able to watch over the year of 2021 what happened to my net worth by going in and out of several real estate transactions. And I feel like in that year, I was only in one location. I did about like 4,500 RVUs, I think, in that year total. So it wasn't that busy of a year. Now I'm doing basically 9,500 or so a year. Like last year, I think I did over 10,000, but I'm doing it highly efficiently. But still, at that time, I think I put in about 20 hours a week into real estate investing in the year of 2021. And at the end of the year, I was able to look at the dollar amounts, and I made about as much money investing in real estate averaged out over those hours. Now that's hard because you don't actually make a dollar when you're spending time doing real estate at the moment that you spent that hour. But I made, in terms of increase in my net worth, almost exactly the same amount per hour, if I assume it was 20 hours a week, which is very close, as I did at my top hour doing surgery. Now I don't think I can always do that. I think that was a moment in time. But the other kicker about that is all those hours that I spent doing surgery, that was it. But then going forward in 22, 23, 24, the hours that I spent investing in real estate, not only did it kick my net, now it didn't give me the cash actually. Most of the time I made equity in the building by doing the deals because I negotiated them to a good price, and maybe I did a value add, right? But the equity was there, and I could have exited, okay? But you can't eat equity, so you have to have both. Nonetheless, each additional year going forward, there is a loan pay down, there is cash flow from rent, right? There's appreciation in the building. And there are some ongoing tax advantages, and there's a huge tax advantage for me the way that I'm doing it in year one. So it's an efficient investment for me that keeps getting better. And most real estate deals, 30 years later, they look like a genius. It doesn't matter like what you paid for it. In 30 years, it just looks like you were a genius. In 5 years, it might not. And in 5 to 10 year time horizon, you might bankrupt yourself by investing in real estate and doing the wrong thing, right? So it's not without risk, right? And you have to go into it appropriately capitalized, minimizing your personal expenses, having a good, strong dollar amount to invest with to begin with, and coming at it from a strong position. But all those little pieces for like the first couple years, when you look on a longer time horizon, they just all generally wash out from the ongoing. And so then I'm not spending 20 hours a week managing those investments now. It's not truly passive. You have to spend a little bit of time. You got to make sure you got big enough, thick enough rubber bands that they don't snap on the side of all your stacks of money. But aside from that, you're going to have your most efficient hours, I think, from your passive income. And so if you don't have passive income, you need to get some. That would be my take on it. And then start now and learn and grow. And don't over leverage yourself. Don't stick your neck out so far that you're going to, get hurt. But it starts by focusing on your job, your dollar per hour, your highest dollar per hour, the time, how much time do you want to spend working, maximize it, minimize your personal expenses, and minimize the things that you just shouldn't be doing. And then take that money and invest it and get yourself financially free. That's what efficiency, that's the point, of efficiency. And then my grandpa said that he talked to an old farmer, and the farmer said, it's like you're pushing a rock over the hill. And once you get that rock over the hill, then it's all pretty easy. And it's like that. I mean, once you get to like level 1 financial independence, which is like your daily needs are met, that changes your mindset. And now you're able to do things like make a podcast and put your ideas out there for the world and try to help other people, where you couldn't do that when you're like hand to mouth. And then once you get beyond that level, then things start to snowball, and then you can give generously, and you can just think more in terms of impact, and spend a little bit more time really focusing on just thinking about what's important to you, and then focusing on it. And for me, like I said, it's basically my family, and spiritually, in the light of everything that's happened with Charlie Kirk in the last week, there's a battle out there, and my participation in that battle, I would say, is one of the most important ways that I can spend and invest my time. And so some people might take the efficiency so far and then struggle with what is the point. But that's a question that everybody needs to answer. And I think it's very obvious that the point is Jesus. And so you decide for yourself, but there's a book with more details about this that's written by like dozens of authors over thousands of years and is congruent with itself. And I would check that out. And at the end of Ecclesiastes, it says, fear God and keep his commandments. This is basically the whole duty of man. And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so I'm preaching to the choir. And how am I doing, right, on a daily basis with the people that I'm interacting with? And how am I doing with my kindness? How am I doing with my gentleness? That's my own That's my own problem, okay? And I'm working on it. For you, you focus on your efficiency. You get yourself free from the hand to mouth thing. Stop doing all the things that don't matter. There's things in my house that are left undone. There's a song called This Old House. The concept is, do you have to do all the things to create your utopia with your perfect McMansion American house? Okay. Yeah, there's a white picket fence and a yard, okay, that you want. But there's a lot of things that are undone at my house that I want to have done, but I am actively choosing to not do them for the sake of efficiency, because there's other things that are more important. So finding your priorities, working on those things, and working on you're going to spend some time working. So make it as efficient as possible. And then you will actually reclaim time, money, and energy. And it will be clear what else is important that needs to be done. There are thoughts about efficiency that I think will come out in the rest of the podcast and in all of my episodes, because it's just something I think about all the time. But this is like a summary, I would say, of how I think about it. What gets measured gets managed. Track your time. Know your worth. Know your dollar per hour worth. Understand that in investing, it's not going to be that dollar per hour right out the gate, but investing because of the long time horizon of the long payoff and spending some investor hours is a great way to be very efficient actually in the long run with your time. I support you as being a rural surgeon. I support you for what you're doing for rural America. I appreciate it. Rural America deserves it. There's values and just qualities that are just so beautiful, being out in on a farm, in nature, in a community where you know the people that are around you. And that's what I am loving, and we're in a time in 2025 where we can connect even virtually when we're miles apart. And so I just support you guys in everything that you're doing. And thank you for listening to the show. I will do my best to not be skipping too many episodes, but overall, 1 year in, I think we've only missed 4 or 5 episodes, something like that. All of them are there on the ruralamericansurgeon.com. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us. Make sure to share the show. If you've enjoyed this, if you've found any value, and you have a friend that you think would benefit from it, please feel free to share. Don't hesitate to reach out with us. There's a get in touch on the ruralamericansurgeon.com, and you can share the reels and whatever. It's been a great year. I plan to continue to do it. I am loving it. And I hope that you have found some value, and thank you very much for listening. So I will see you on the next episode of the Rural American Surgeon Podcast. Have a great day.